Great. Thanks, everyone. We've given it a few minutes to let more people into the room, so I think it's probably time that we get going with today's webinar. So today we're going to mostly focus on the design and heritage chapters of Haringey's draft local plan. So we'll start off with a brief introduction to the draft local plan, and then we'll spend about 10 minutes giving a very high-level summary of what you can find in the design chapter of the draft local plan, and then the same for the heritage chapter. And then we'll just do a brief overview of a reminder of the different ways in which you can respond to the consultation and have your say about these draft policies. And then finally, we'll have about half an hour because it's a lunchtime session. So there's about 30 minutes for us to open up to a question and answer session at the end. So to start with, what is the local plan? So the local plan is a really important document, one of the council's most important documents, as it's the main document used to determine planning applications in Haringey. So what does that mean? So what the plan does do is it sets a vision for the kind of places that we want to live, work and spend time in the borough. And that vision is for a 15-year period of time. So it really does cover a lot of new development that will happen and the plan for future growth over the next 15 years. It also determines things like allocating land for housing, jobs, shops and green spaces, and that includes things like where tall buildings should or shouldn't be located in the borough. And it includes requirements and guidelines to ensure quality standards, so on things like design quality or standards relating to energy efficiency and climate change that all new buildings should be following. And it includes things like protecting our heritage sites and the natural environment. Some examples of things that the local plan doesn't do includes it doesn't fund or deliver new development. It doesn't cover the management of council services like street cleaning, housing tenancies, parking or LTNs. And it doesn't make decisions on the delivery of schools, hospitals or transport projects or set council tax or budgets. And so why do we need a new local plan? National planning policy requires local authorities to review their local plan every 5 years to make sure that it's up to date. So at Haringey, we've got an existing suite of a collection of documents that was adopted in 2017. Those are those colourful documents at the top of the slide there. And since those documents were produced in 2017, quite a lot has changed, both nationally, regionally, and within the borough. So this includes things like changes to the regulations, to national policy and legislation. We've had a new local London plan published by the GLA, and that set out new London-wide planning policies. Haringey Council has declared a climate emergency within that time. And of course, we have a growing housing crisis and an increasing focus on the importance of health and well-being in the wake of things like COVID-19 and the cost of living crisis. So this is a really key opportunity for us to consolidate our existing suite of planning policy documents and for us to also deliver on exciting opportunities such as Haringey being the London Borough of Culture in 2027, as well as addressing ongoing challenges like the homelessness crisis that we're facing both in our borough and across London. So which documents will be replaced once the draft local plan gets published? So there are several different planning policy documents. There's a framework of policies that our local plan sits within. So new development will still need to comply with national planning policy. It'll also need to be compliant with the London plan, with the North London Waste plan, and with any neighbourhood plans that are produced in the borough. So at the moment, we have an adopted neighbourhood plan for Highgate in Haringey. And then those documents that will be replaced by the new local plan are our strategic policies DPD, our development management DPD, our site allocations DPD, and the Tottenham Area Action Plan. So eventually those will be superseded once this draft plan is finalised and published. and instead the new local plan will take its place. And our new local plan will also be supported by supplementary planning documents, so extra guidance and new guidance that helps to support that plan will be published following on from the adoption of the local plan. So what are the key steps to creating a new local plan, and where are we at the moment in this journey? So there are key mandatory steps that are set out by national planning policy that we need to follow as part of the process to producing and publishing a new local plan. And those key steps involve public consultation, like the one that we are running at the moment. So we're at the blue step in this diagram. So this is the second step of the consultation process for this local plan. We actually undertook our first consultation related to the local plan back in 2020, 2021 during COVID. So that was an online consultation called an issues and options or first steps engagement on the draft plan, on the local plan. And that was done before we began drafting anything. So that was when we went out to the community and asked very broad questions to try and find out what's most important to people in Haringey, what are the key policy issues, and get some early ideas from the community that we could then respond to and use to shape our draft local plan. So we've gone away, we've listened to the feedback that we received back in 2020, and this draft plan that we're sharing with everyone now for comment and for feedback is based on the policy directions that we heard from everybody back at that in 2020. And then the next steps after we finish this consultation as a team, we will need to go away and look at every single piece of feedback that we receive and take that into consideration and make any necessary changes where needed to the draft policies. And then that will become our proposed submission plan. That's the next step, which will, when we come out to consultation again on a more refined version of the local plan, and that will be an opportunity to see how the updated local plan, what that looks like, and therefore what we will be submitting eventually to the examiner. And it's an opportunity for people to provide further feedback on the detailed wording of those policies so that we can make any necessary modifications to that wording before it gets submitted to the inspector for examination. And then finally, we hope to get the plan adopted by winter 2026. We were on a very speedy programme to try and get the local plan out, as it's such an important document for the borough. So how is the draft local plan structured? Well, it's split into 3 volumes, 3 parts. So the first part at the top of the diagram there, it's all about the overarching spatial vision, and it also shares our placemaking framework for Haringey. So the key overarching objectives, priorities and approach for our placemaking framework, and also our spatial strategy for the borough. So where new development should be happening in the borough and whether it should be at a large comprehensive scale or in some locations at a smaller scale, enhancing what's already there. And then we go into more detail in parts 2 and 3 of the draft local plan. So part 2 is where you can find all of the detailed policies for each neighbourhood area in Haringey. And then part 3 is about all of the borough-wide policies. So these are policies that apply for all new development in the borough, whereas the neighbourhood chapter focuses in on potential locations for new development within each neighbourhood and the placemaking approach that should be taken. The borough-wide chapters are about quality standards and planning policies that need to apply for any new development happening in the borough. So that's highlighted in orange because today's chapters, the design chapter and the heritage chapter, are borough-wide policies that would apply for any new development happening. So we do have, just a reminder, that we do have printed copies of the draft local plan available to review at every library in Haringey. And we also have our online web version of this. If you want to find the detailed information from today's slides, then these slides will be uploaded to to our website shortly after this presentation, and a quick and easy way of going straight to the relevant area of the website is we've made this into a hyperlink so that you'll be able to click on that image on the left and it will take you straight to that part of the website if you haven't managed to find our design and heritage chapters already on there. It's a very big document, so we're doing our best to try and break it down into bite-sized chunks and provide lots of different ways for people to read and review either just a part of the document or the overall whole version of the draft local plan, if preferred. So today we're going to talk about our design and heritage chapters. So the design chapter introduces policies to ensure that we deliver high quality development in Haringey that contributes positively to the distinctive character and amenity of the borough. And it includes a set of Haringey design principles that build on the existing Haringey design charter that's in our adopted plan and bring it up to date. And then for chapter 19 on heritage, this set of policies is about conserving the significance of the borough's heritage assets, and that includes listed buildings, conservation areas, and archaeology. So it's focused on built heritage and the built historic environment. And it also includes a new Haringey Conservation Charter, which we'll touch on in a little bit. So just starting off with the design chapter, to summarise some of the feedback that we received from people at our First Steps engagement in 2020. So we heard from people that it was really important to ensure that we undertake inclusive engagement in order to achieve good design. And that was applied both to this Regulation 19 consultation to make sure we hear from everybody, but also this is about when design proposals get submitted for planning applications, to make sure that any engagement that happens on larger schemes, so that might be engagement that's undertaken by applicants, by developers who are coming forward with larger sites, to make sure that those engagements are carried out in an inclusive way to help inform designs and make developments inclusive for everybody. Participants in the First Steps engagement also expressed support for enhancing local identity through public art, through street lighting and creative interventions. There were also suggestions to include holding public design competitions for higher profile developments to encourage innovation and community engagement, as well as strong support for sustainable design and exploring opportunities for reusing existing buildings. So recognising that if we're to reach our net zero targets, we really need to think about the climate from an early stage and how that can shape good design, and we make the most of the potential that individual developments have to contribute to a better environment in Haringey. And then there were calls for a borough-wide design strategy to ensure that new tall buildings respond well to Haringey's existing character. So since 2020, we have been updating our evidence studies, and we have been researching what the key changes are in regional and national policy that we should be ensuring our design policies align with. So some of that, the important elements of that include that the London Plan has published the new version of the London Plan, that's now the currently adopted version. It sets a new definition for tall buildings that's based on local context and is plan-led. So policy D9 of the London Plan says that a tall building should be no less than 6 stories or 18 metres measured from the ground to the uppermost story floor level. Now, the London Plan also advises that local authorities need to review and test whether or not that definition is appropriate for our local context. And so in order to do that, we undertook an urban character assessment based on the methodology that's set out by the GLA and the London Plan to review and identify locations that are potentially appropriate for tall buildings, and also to consider important local views and character as part of this. So there is it'll be up on the screen shortly, but there is a policy map where we have identified potential locations suitable for tall buildings. And that's also something which the London Plan now states is important for us to do, because previously, whilst we do in our adopted plan identify locations suitable for tall buildings, in the past proposals for tall buildings might still be considered if they fell outside of those locations. However, now the London Plan specifies that tall buildings will only be permitted where locations that are potentially appropriate have been identified by local authorities. So it means that the map that we have published as part of this consultation, new tall buildings would only be allowed in those locations. Our local views topic paper also identifies locally important views that should be protected, ensuring that new development preserves and enhances local character. So there was some evidence that was prepared back in 2017, which the team has done an updated review of, and that will be published this week. So just to summarise the proposals that are included, the policies that are included in the design chapter of the plan, and some of the key priorities. Proposals must take a design-led approach, responding to local character and needs. Tall buildings must meet design quality standards, and they will only be permitted in specific locations. That's resulting from our evidence and the new policy guidance from the London Plan. And then all proposals must meet the following Haringey design principles. So all new development in the borough must prioritise climate resilience. It should respond positively to context. It should provide a healthy environment. It should support inclusion and diversity. It should connect communities, so take opportunities to improve connections, cycle and pedestrian connections wherever possible. It should be integrated and functional, so avoiding unnecessary extra street clutter, and making sure that building services and waste is dealt with efficiently and in an attractive, to ensure that we have attractive streets and public spaces. It should be, all new proposals must be zero carbon, and they must be designed to last. So on those last 2 points of zero carbon and being designed to last, for example, for zero carbon, that as a design consideration, we need to think about whether or not which way larger windows are facing. Are they going to overheat? How should shading be attractively incorporated into the design of buildings and thought about from the outset? And for example, on being designed to last, it's thinking about good quality materials and materials that are appropriate for the type of weather that we're going to have. Will they be durable? Will they, if they're in a public, highly trafficked area, will they start to look tatty very quickly? We don't want that. We want to encourage low maintenance, robust materials that are going to look good as long as possible. So just to summarize, both chapters begin with a overarching strategic policy that set out the key principles. So for the design chapter, those are our Haringey design principles. This policy starts by setting out that all proposals must achieve good design and contribute to the distinctive character and amenity of the local area. And the council will support proposals that are developed through a design-led approach, which are consistent with the following principles. And those are those principles that I've just listed out just now. There's more detail included in the in the policy itself, and I do recommend, if you're interested, going away and reading about it. One of the key things that we were bearing in mind when we came to review overall our design chapter for our new local plan was that we do already have, and we went and spoke to our development management officers in our planning service to see how has it been going with using our adopted policies. And our adopted plan does have a lot of detailed policies already in it. But one key message that we were hearing is that there's so much ground that we need to cover and so much detail that needs to be provided within design policies. Can we try to make sure that the policies are clearly structured and that the detail is sort of set out in a way that's easy and accessible to understand? So would really welcome anybody on this call, if you're interested in looking at the design chapter and letting us know your thoughts, if you could also tell us how you find it. Is it easy to understand all of the detail? Is it easy to navigate and find and sort of move between one topic and another? Is it clearly set out? And that's something that we recognise is very important to the final result of having a good quality design, because applicants who are looking to these policies to inform how they go about designing their proposals need to be able to easily understand what's expected of them. And some of the detail that's set out more in the policy includes things like, what will we expect an applicant to have looked at on their site analysis? So there's some detailed supporting information about what we expect planning applications to include to help demonstrate that they're of a good quality. And then the point B of that, the second part of this overarching strategic policy says, proposals must be designed in accordance with adopted design guides or design codes where these apply. So that's making sure that any supplementary design guidance that provides more detail that's either currently or published in future, there's a hook in the local plan which makes sure that everyone's aware that design guidance that's published is also something that applicants need to be following. There's quite a few different topics that are covered by the design chapter, and we wouldn't have time for me to sort of go into detail on each one of these for the presentation, and we hope to sort of have a discussion about the ones that you on the call today are most interested in at the end of this presentation. But these are all of the topics that are covered in the chapter. So the first couple of policies set out, firstly, the design principles. The second policy is about taking the design-led approach and delivering design quality. And then we have dedicated policies on inclusive design, so making places accessible for everybody. Public realm, so the design of our streets and our public spaces. We have policies on active street frontages and shop fronts, so thinking about the appearance and character of our high streets and shopping parades, and then policies on lighting, on advertisements. We have dedicated policy on master plans and site assembly, setting out sort of what we would expect to see from a planning application that's proposing a master plan, and sort of more detail on what's required for those types of applications. Then we have a policy about local views and protected views, and Haringey does have a strategic view, which I think I'll touch on in a moment. And then we have a policy, our new policy on tall buildings, one on high quality housing, on waste storage, and then finally some policies on residential extensions, basements and light wells, which is more detailed than our current policy and aligns with some of the more detailed policies of our neighbouring boroughs, such as Camden. That was based on feedback we received from the community, so we've listened and amended that policy. And then finally, we have a policy on managing the impacts of construction. So rather than going through each, I will just do a briefly touch on a couple of topics which might be of interest. So our policy on tall and mid-rise buildings, the policy is longer and more detailed than we have in our current adopted plan. it aligns with the London Plan approach, and it also sets out criteria for tall buildings, including about their visual impact, so design criteria around the visual impact of the tall building, the relationship to the public realm, so what should tall buildings consider when they meet the ground, what should be provided in the public realm, requirements on assessments to demonstrate that tall buildings mitigate potential microclimate impacts, so avoiding wind tunnels and the type of environmental assessments that are necessary for tall buildings, amenity in tall and mid-rise buildings. So this is about the shared spaces, shared amenity that everyone living in those or working in those buildings needs. So setting specific requirements for that, and also details on how the council would expect applicants to demonstrate design quality. And we're in an ongoing process working closely with the GLA to ensure that our approach to our tall buildings policy is aligned. The GLA has indicated that they may update their tall buildings policy. So we had a meeting with them and actually with their specialist consultants who helped them to produce their tall buildings guidance last time around, and they're currently undergoing a review of that guidance. So as soon as they update their approach, we hope that we'll be able to ensure that that's in time for our Reg 19 evidence, so that we can make sure that we publish our updated evidence and it aligns with what is being proposed in the London Plan. We reviewed the London Plan's new criteria around what should be defined as a tall building, and what's currently proposed in Haringey's draft plan after that review is that we should keep our current definition of a tall building. So the proposed definition for tall buildings that's in the draft plan is that a tall building Haringey is a building that's at least 30 meters high when measured from ground to floor level of the uppermost story, and that equates to about 10 stories. And those tall buildings consistent with the London Plan, tall buildings would only be permitted in areas identified as suitable on the policy map. So this is our policy map, and these are at the moment the draft proposed areas identified. We'll be undertaking further evidence. We're doing more studies, volumetric studies, with 3D modeling to test out these areas that have been locations that have been identified to ensure that they don't have that they're appropriate, that they are in harmony with important local views. And so that work is ongoing, and it will be finalized for Reg 19, so for the next stage of consultation. And then we've also included some detail in our policy for mid-rise buildings. So that lower threshold of about 6-story high building that's set as the minimum baseline in the London Plan, we considered making that the definition of a tall building Haringey, but then after a detailed review, we felt that for Haringey that wasn't appropriate. It would be very restrictive on potential development in certain locations of the borough. So but however, we do think that it's important that the same quality standards apply to any buildings that are between 6 and 10 stories, and that all of those quality standards around amenity that's provided for people in those buildings and demonstrating design quality should also apply for mid-rise buildings. So the policy is called Tall and Mid-Rise Buildings because it sets out quality standards for all buildings that are above 6 stories or above 18 meters. But we've introduced that sort of middle category of mid-rise buildings, and what that means is those mid-rise buildings will need to comply with the policy. However, they can be assessed on a case-by-case basis. They don't necessarily have to only be built in the locations that are identified on the policy map. So that's what's currently proposed in our draft local plan. The views topic paper will be published this week. I've just thought to give you a quick preview of the approach that we are taking, and the work that was undertaken. So there was a very detailed study that was commissioned by the council in 2017 with external consultants who undertook a very detailed analysis of local views across the whole borough, and that has been used as a working document to assess applications over the last few years. But it's now out of date. So the team undertook a review of that body of evidence. We went out to all of the different viewing locations to take into account any new development that has popped up in the borough since then, and check how those recommended local protected local views are looking. And when we publish this piece of evidence is being developed in 2 stages. So there is this topic paper that will be released this week will set out a very simple map of identifying the locations in the borough where the views are, the protected views, proposed protected views are. So it will include maps like the one at the top there, showing the direction of the view and where it's located on the map. And it's accompanied by a photograph of the view and then a description. Now, I didn't have enough space on this slide to give you the full copy of the description of the view for this example view reference 3, which is at Firm Park Road, but it's just to give you a bit of a taste of what is included in this first phase topic paper that will be published this week. It just sets out where local views are proposed to be. It provides up-to-date photos of the view and an overall description of what is to be protected in that view. And then there'll be ongoing further evidence produced by the team running into Regulation 19 alongside this study, more detailed study of appropriate locations for tall buildings, to make sure that those 2 pieces of work are aligned and to help developers understand which sites would or wouldn't be fall within a protected view. So that's what the work will continue to progress over the next few months after this consultation ends and before the Reg 19 consultation happens next year. So just briefly on design codes. So just a reminder that our approach for design codes is that at the moment the team are focusing on submitting the new local plan, and that's because it's the most important, it carries the most material weight as a planning document. So it's really important that we get the new local plan, the draft local plan, out to consultation now, and then hopefully the new local plan adopted by 2026, end of 2026. So the approach we're taking is to include a hook in our in our strategic policies. So back to the slide I showed earlier, the Haringey Design Principles policy at the end states that proposals should also take into consideration design codes and design guidance. So that's giving us the opportunity to after the publication of this new local plan, then further develop our more detailed design codes where needed in the borough. So at the moment, this is the approach that we're taking. Of course, we do already have some, our South Tottenham House Extensions SPD, which is a design code effectively. It sets out more detailed design guidance around what is permitted for small extensions on homes in South Tottenham. So that piece of work will be reviewed as part of that design codes review that we will undertake as a team after the new local plan is published. So hopefully I'm doing okay for time. I think we've only got 20 minutes left of the session, so I may have to just skip quickly through heritage so that we have time for questions and answers. Apologies, as you can see, there's a lot of content in these chapters. So some key feedback that people told us about heritage at First Steps. People expressed strong support for the continued protection and enhancement of our historic environment. They told us that built heritage is valued for the character and sense of identity it provides and the beauty it contributes. Feedback also called for stronger protection of our historic parks and landscapes, and there were calls for an up-to-date design guidance on the impact of development on local views, which we've just touched on. People also told us that we should prioritise saving heritage assets that Historic England has identified as being at risk. So the council has reviewed its archaeological priority areas, and a new study was published that was funded by Historic England. So our new archaeological priority, the new APA, apologies, I guess a lot to get around. So this APA study identified 8 new archaeological priority areas. So we have now a total of 30 identified in the borough. So this evidence, if adopted, once this gets adopted, would mean that 34% of the borough falls within an APA. So that means 34% of the borough requires an archaeological assessment during planning. So you may have noticed, if you've been looking at the neighbourhood policies in our draft plan, that individual site allocations also flag up and refer to the archaeological priority sites where they fall on a site allocation. So making sure that developers are aware that they would need to, and applicants are aware that they would need to submit an assessment where archaeology exists on their site. The council is also undertaking ongoing work to update our CAMPs, so our conservation area management plans. The draft plan includes a map of all of the draft heritage designations for the draft plan. So this includes mapping out things like where listed buildings, local buildings are, our registered parks and gardens. But what we can see here is the archaeological priority areas also in the grey dots. There's quite a large area of the east of the borough, and also the west, and then Finsbury Park. So lots of locations we can see those archaeological priority areas. And also our conservation areas and our strategic view from St Ali Pali, Alexandra Palace to St Paul's is also here on the map. Summary of the proposed policy approach set out in the heritage chapter of the plan. So this chapter supports protecting and enhancing the borough's heritage through supporting conservation-led placemaking and the reuse of historic buildings, requiring heritage impact assessments, impact statements for proposals that are affecting heritage assets, resisting the demolition of buildings that contribute positively to conservation areas, requiring archaeological assessments in areas of known or potential archaeological interest, and encouraging the interpretation and celebration of heritage through design and public engagement. And again, another priority for us when approaching this section of the local plan was to try and structure this chapter about built heritage in a way that's very clearly organised, so it helps people to find the bit that they are interested in for their individual project or site or location. So easily finding out the information about listed buildings or conservation areas. So I hope that that's the case, and please do let us know if you think there are ways we could improve that in our draft policies. So just a summary of that strategic policy, the Built Heritage Conservation Charter, that's the main sort of new addition to this section of Haringey's local plan. So the charter sets out that all proposals affecting heritage assets must conserve the significance of those heritage assets, including any contribution made by their setting. And the council will support proposals which achieve this and are informed by a robust assessment of the significance of affected heritage assets. And they invest in conservation-led area placemaking using the historic environment as the basis for good design and positive change. So proposals that bring heritage assets at risk back into beneficial use will also be supported. Increasing inclusive access to the historic environment. Proposals should support climate change mitigation and adaptation, and also promote high quality architecture, streets and open spaces which positively complement the historic environment. And then the second part of the policy sets out the requirement for heritage impact statements for all proposals that impact a designated or non-designated heritage asset. So those are the key topics that are covered in the chapter. So we have policy on the Conservation Charter, then listed buildings, registered parks and gardens, conservation areas, and non-designated heritage assets and archaeology. Before we open the Q&A session, just a quick reminder that there's more than one way you can provide your feedback on the draft plan. So you can email us directly at newlocalplan@haringey.gov.uk, or you can go to our website and you will find surveys. When you scroll to the bottom of the topic page, there are some simple surveys which you can where you can submit your responses. Or alternatively, if you come along to any of our in-person events, we do have paper surveys which are available to fill in and return to an officer in person at those events. And just another reminder that we have added quite a few events over the next 2 weeks. So please do check out the events page. If you would like to come along and join us in person or online at any of the other sessions, please do so.